Sterkfontein cave rescue cable snap tragedy. On a cold morning in South Africa, a rescue team gathered at the entrance to the Sterkfontein caves in Gauteng province. Deep below them, an injured caver was trapped at the bottom of a vertical shaft, unable to move or climb out on his own. The Sterkfontein cave system was famous for its ancient fossils and underground lakes, but it was also one of the most dangerous cave systems in the country. The vertical shafts inside the caves dropped straight down for dozens of meters, with jagged limestone walls on every side. Getting an injured person out of a shaft like that required heavy equipment, nerves of steel, and a plan that left no room for error. The rescue team had done this kind of work before. They were experienced, well-trained, and confident in their gear. Their plan was straightforward: strap the injured caver to a steel stretcher, attach the stretcher to a heavy-duty steel cable, and use a motorized pulley system to haul him straight up the shaft. The cable they were using was rated to handle thousands of pounds of weight. It had been inspected, certified, and used successfully on previous rescues without any problems. A team of support workers positioned themselves at different levels along the shaft to guide the stretcher and keep it from snagging on the rock walls. One of these support workers was a young man who had volunteered for some of the most dangerous rescue missions in the region. He stood on a narrow ledge partway up the shaft, ready to steady the stretcher as it passed his position. The injured caver was carefully loaded onto the stretcher and strapped in tightly. The cable was attached, the pulley motor was engaged, and the slow, careful lift began. The stretcher rose inch by inch, swinging gently as it cleared the first section of the shaft. The cable groaned under the weight, vibrating slightly as it stretched taut between the stretcher and the pulley above. Everyone held their breath as the stretcher climbed higher, passing the halfway point of the shaft. Then, without any warning, the cable reached its breaking point. The steel wire snapped with a sound like a gunshot echoing off the cave walls. When a cable under thousands of pounds of tension breaks, it does not simply fall, it becomes a supersonic whip. The broken end of the cable recoiled through the shaft at a speed faster than the human eye could follow. In less than 1 second, the loose cable struck the young support worker standing on the ledge. The impact hit him across the torso with the force of a speeding car. He was thrown off the ledge and slammed into the rock wall behind him before anyone could even process what had happened. There was no time to shout a warning, no time to duck, and no time to move out of the way. The entire event, from the snap to the impact, was over in less than a heartbeat. Other team members scrambled to reach him, but when they got to his body, they knew immediately that it was too late. The cable had caused catastrophic internal trauma. His ribs were shattered and his organs had been destroyed by the force of the impact. He was dead before his body hit the ground. The stretcher carrying the injured caver had dropped back down the shaft when the cable broke, but miraculously the caver survived the fall with additional injuries. The rescue was eventually completed hours later using backup equipment, and the injured caver was brought to the surface alive. Woodville, Karst plane, bad air pocket death. On a humid morning in the summer of 1999, a man named Hayden drove down a dirt road through the swamps of northern Florida. He was heading toward a remote spring entrance hidden in the forest near Tallahassee, a gateway to one of the largest underwater cave systems in America. The system was called the Woodville Karst Plain, and it stretched for over 22 miles beneath the swamps, forests, and farmland of the region. Hayden was an experienced open water diver and a member of an elite Air Force rescue team trained for the most dangerous missions imaginable. He had dived in oceans, lakes, and rivers all over the world, and he was confident in his abilities. But today he was doing something he had never been properly trained for: diving alone into a flooded limestone cave. He had no cave diving certification, no guideline reel, and no specialized cave diving lights. What he did have was a camera strapped to his gear, a full tank of air, and a desire to see what was hiding in the darkness below. Hayden slipped into the cool, clear water of the spring and began his descent into the cave system. The entrance opened into a wide tunnel of pale limestone, and the visibility was extraordinary. He could see dozens of meters ahead. He kicked deeper, following the natural shape of the passage as it curved and narrowed beneath the earth. The ceiling above him was not smooth. It was full of hollows, dips, and uneven pockets carved out of the soft rock over millions of years. In many of these hollows, small pockets of trapped gas sat above the waterline like invisible bubbles pressed against the ceiling. Some of these pockets contained safe, breathable air left behind by previous divers or natural processes. But others were filled with dangerously high concentrations of carbon dioxide or hydrogen sulfide that had seeped from the limestone and the water below. From underwater, there was absolutely no way to tell the difference between a safe pocket and a deadly one. They looked exactly the same. A small, dark space above the surface where a diver could lift their head and take a breath. As Hayden swam through a narrow tunnel about 3 meters below the surface, he spotted one of these air pockets above him. To any diver, an air pocket looks like a gift, a chance to breathe real air without using your tank supply. Hayden rose toward the ceiling, lifted his face above the waterline, and pulled the breathing regulator out of his mouth. His camera was still recording, capturing everything in sharp detail. He took one breath of the gas trapped inside the pocket. There was no coughing, no choking, no warning of any kind. The concentration of carbon dioxide in that pocket was far above 10%, high enough to shut down a human brain in a single inhalation. Scientists call it CO2 narcosis. At those levels, the gas does not make you gasp for air. It simply switches your consciousness off like a light. Hayden's eyes rolled back. His body went completely limp, and he slid away from the air pocket without a sound. His camera recorded him falling in slow motion through the water, sinking toward the floor of a tunnel barely 1 meter wide. His body came to rest at the bottom of the passage, directly beneath the pocket that had killed him. He did not twitch, he did not struggle, and he never moved again. From the moment he removed his regulator to the moment his heart stopped, less than 60 seconds had passed. When recovery divers found Hayden's body days later, they checked his equipment and found something haunting. His air tank still held 170 bars of perfectly good breathing gas, more than enough to complete the dive and return safely to the surface. El Tancón Sea Cave, Drowning Tragedy. In August of 2021, a 33-year-old woman named Jasmine Ben Ali arrived in Tenerife for a summer vacation. She had traveled from Switzerland to enjoy the sun, the beaches, and the volcanic beauty of the Canary Islands. On one of her first days on the island, she joined 2 friends for a trip along the western coastline near the town of Puerto Santiago. They had seen photos online of a hidden sea cave with crystal-clear turquoise water glowing between black volcanic walls. The place was called El Tancón, and the pictures made it look like a secret paradise tucked beneath the rocks. When they arrived, the sea appeared calm, and the water inside the cave looked perfectly still. There were signs posted at the entrance warning that swimming was completely forbidden. But other people were already in the water, and everything seemed safe. Jasmine and her friends climbed down the rocks and slipped into the cool, clear water of the cave. What none of them understood was that El Tancón was not a natural pool. It was a volcanic blowhole connected directly to the open Atlantic Ocean. Beneath the surface, a maze of underwater tunnels and passages linked the cave to the sea outside. When an ocean swell pushes into these tunnels, it creates what scientists call the piston effect. The incoming wave compresses the air inside the cave like a giant pump being forced down. In under 10 seconds, the water level can rise from waist deep all the way to the ceiling. A person caught inside is slammed against the jagged volcanic rock with thousands of pounds of crushing force. Then, just as fast, the water reverses direction and sucks everything back out through the tunnels like a drain being pulled open. The most terrifying thing about El Tancón is that the sea does not even need to be rough for this to happen. A single large swell rolling in from miles out in the Atlantic is enough to trigger the deadly compression. Local experts say you cannot read the danger at this cave unless you have spent years studying the water. On that August day, the sea looked peaceful on the surface, and Jasmine had no reason to be afraid. Then, without any warning, a powerful ocean swell surged into the cave from the tunnels below. The water inside the cave erupted into a violent, churning whirlpool in an instant. Jasmine and her friends were thrown around like rag dolls as the water slammed them against the rock walls. The force pulled all 3 of them beneath the surface and dragged them toward the underwater passages. Her friend Giovanni Rodriguez, a 27-year-old Italian man who lived on the island, was sucked deep into the tunnels and never resurfaced. The 3rd member of the group was somehow thrown clear and pulled to safety with only minor injuries. Jasmine was dragged through the violent current but was eventually reached by rescuers who pulled her from the water. She was unconscious and in critical condition, her body battered from being slammed against the lava rock. She was rushed to the Nuestra Señora de la Candelaria hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. But the damage to her body was too severe. Jasmine died the following day from cardiorespiratory arrest. Giovanni's body was found the next morning, floating lifeless in the water just outside the cave entrance. 2 young lives were gone in under 60 seconds, taken by a cave that had looked like paradise just moments before. Blue hole Yuri Lipski death. On April 28, 2000, diving instructor Yuri Lipski arrived at the Blue Hole in Egypt. The Blue Hole is a massive underwater sinkhole in the Red Sea. While it is technically a sinkhole, the ceiling and walls create a cave-like environment. The Blue Hole is one of the most dangerous dive sites in the world. Hundreds of divers have died in this location over the years. Yuri Lipski was an experienced diving instructor who knew the risks. He decided to attempt what divers call a bounce dive. A bounce dive means descending rapidly to extreme depth and returning quickly. Lipski planned to dive alone to the bottom of the Blue Hole. The bottom was over 295 feet deep. He carried a handheld camera to record his dive. Lipski entered the water and began his rapid descent into the blue abyss. The camera recorded his view as he dropped deeper and deeper. The walls of the sinkhole surrounded him on all sides like a cave. As he descended past 165 feet, the danger zone began. At extreme depth, nitrogen in a diver's air supply becomes toxic to the brain. This condition is called nitrogen narcosis, and it feels like being drunk. Divers with nitrogen narcosis cannot think clearly or make good decisions. They become confused, disoriented, and unable to judge danger properly. Lipski continued descending rapidly past 230 feet, then 260 feet. The camera shows he was dropping far too fast for a safe dive. By the time he reached over 295 feet, the nitrogen narcosis had taken full effect. His brain was severely impaired by the toxic nitrogen in his blood. At the bottom of the Blue Hole, Lipski realized something was terribly wrong. The camera captured his frantic movements as panic set in. He tried desperately to inflate his buoyancy compensator device. The buoyancy compensator is a vest that helps divers float back to the surface. But Lipski was too confused and disoriented to operate his equipment correctly. His hands fumbled with the controls as the nitrogen narcosis clouded his mind. The footage shows his breathing becoming rapid and panicked. Every breath at that extreme depth consumed his limited air supply faster. Lipski tried over and over to inflate the vest and rise from the bottom. But his impaired brain could not coordinate the simple actions needed. Time was running out as his air supply dropped critically low. The camera recorded his movements becoming slower and weaker. Eventually, Yuri Lipski collapsed on the seafloor at over 295 feet deep. He'd lost consciousness from the combination of nitrogen narcosis and air depletion. Yuri Lipski died alone on the bottom of the Blue Hole. His body was recovered days later along with his handheld camera. The camera had recorded every moment of his final dive.